Good afternoon and welcome to the 2022 CAHELP I-MTSS Symposium. We thank you for being here today in person and those of you out there in our virtual world. We appreciate the time you took out of this very busy day in the crazy world that we're living in right now to be here with us to hear two amazing speakers. First up, we have Kevin Hines. Kevin Hines is a storyteller at heart. He is a best-selling author, global public speaker, and award-winning documentary filmmaker. 2 years after he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder at the age of 19, Kevin attempted to take his own life by jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. Since the Golden Gate Bridge opened in 1937, there have been thousands of people who have made the jump, with only 34 surviving. Kevin is one of them. Many factors contributed to his miraculous survival, including a sea lion which kept him afloat until the Coast Guard arrived. Kevin now travels the world sharing his story of hope, healing, and recovery, while teaching people of all ages the art of wellness and the ability to survive pain with true resilience. At CAHELP, we reference Kevin's mission of hope, along with showing the trailer of his movie, The Ripple Effect, in our suicide versus self-harm training. Please welcome to the stage Mr. Kevin Hines.
Thank you so much. Cheers. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. I greatly appreciate it. I'm grateful to be anywhere. That said, before I begin to share with all of you wonderful people my story, there's something that we must do. Right here, right now, and together. We must take a moment of silence for all of those that we have lost to death by suicide from lethal emotional pain, the common denominator of how and why we lose people to suicide. In my short years on this planet, I have lost 11 people I care about to suicide. And that's 11 people too many, right? Yes. One person is one too many, right? Yes. So right here, right now, and together, let us honor their memory. Let us hold it dear. Let us never forget the light that exuded from within them when they were still here. And let us be thankful for the very little time we had with them. A moment of silence for all of those that we have lost this way. Thank you. Are you okay? Is something wrong? Or can I help you? Were quite literally the only words I desperately needed to hear the day I found myself standing atop the Golden Gate Bridge walkway, believing beyond a shadow of a doubt that I had not one other course of action to take but to die by these two hands from said lethal emotional pain. On that day, I believed I was useless. I felt completely worthless, and I thought my family and friends hated me and wanted me gone. Was any of that true? No, my family loved me. My friends cared for me. My acquaintances would have been there that day to tear me from that rail to safety had they known where I was and what I was doing, right? But my brain wasn't allowing me to care. My brain was trying to kill me as I desperately tried to cling to life. And what is your brain if not the single most powerful organ you wield? Mostly on automatic mode, controlling every action and inaction you take, every decision and indecision. For lack of a better way of saying it, if your brain is malfunctioning, there goes the rest of you. And today in society, all around America and all around the world, people look at people with brain pain, mental crises, and they say things like, snap out of it, get over it, move on, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. What is wrong with you? Oh, it's all in your head. Well, you're darn right it's in my head. It's in my brain, the single most powerful organ I wield. I had people in my family, I had friends tell me those things because they didn't understand the true severity of brain pain or mental health crises or struggle or challenge. I didn't understand it. But what led me then, a 19-year-old young man, to the Golden Gate Bridge, what some call the ninth wonder of the world, what others call the most beautiful man-made structure ever created? An Art Deco masterpiece that is not safe. What led me there, and how did I get to live? In order to answer those questions, we have to stop here and go all the way back into the rearview mirror, into the time I was born. August, all those years ago, to biological parents as I am adopted, Marcia Silvera and Martino Perales. Martino was half Mexican and half Italian. Marcia hailed from James Bond Island, Jamaica. She was Jamaican, Black, African, Arawak, Indian, Portuguese, Scottish, Irish, English, and Sephardic Jew, basically everything but Russian. And Marcia and Martino fell head over heels in love in the 1970s, and they had two infant boys, me and my brother, just 10 months apart, if you catch my drift. They moved quick, right? Me and my brother. My name wasn't always Kevin Hines. That's my adopted name. My biological name is Giovanni Gabriel Prasad Perales. Say that 10 times fast. Go. No? But somehow my brother's name is just Jordash. Where are his four names? Well, my birth parents had us. And I know they loved us, but they had very little else. They had no feasible legal income. We were born in severe poverty. We lived in and out of crack motels. For the first few months of my formative months, they fed us what they could steal. They fed us Kool-Aid, Coca-Cola, and sour milk. That was my first diet. My brother and I had distended bellies filled with liquid and bruises from the tops of our sternum to the bottom of our abdomens from being malnourished for so long. Until one day, in one of those seedy motels, one seedy motel clerk made his most unseedy decision. He heard our screams and our cries of neglect just one too many times, and he did us the first solid anybody ever would. He called the police. And thank God he did. The police came in with Child Protective Services. They swooped us up, smelling sour and putrid of our own filth, and they placed us into the system. Who knows what system I speak of? Foster care. A system, for all the good it's done, allowed kids at that time to age out into 18 into homelessness without a penny in their pockets, allowing other kids to be abused and neglected by the very foster parents set to protect them. A system, for all the good it does in this country today, still allows both those things to occur now. My brother and I bounced around from home to home with one simple idea, that he and I were to be adopted together. You think that's what happened? No way. We bounced around from home to home, knew mom and dad every couple of days or weeks, no stability, often neglect in those homes. And in one of those homes filled with neglect, we both got a vicious strain of bronchitis, and my only full-blooded brother, Jordash, died. I immediately developed a severe detachment disorder from reality and abandonment issues that follow me until today. Every time somebody I love dies, I feel like they're leaving me on purpose, and I can't shake it no matter how much therapy I do. And I promise you, I do a lot of therapy. My brother passed away. They say that Jordash looked exactly like me with blonde curly hair. Can you see it? He passed away. I survived. And unlike my poor brother, I got lucky. I landed in my first great foster home. They do exist. I landed in the home of Peter and Deborah Muller. Peter was in the Army, often has to be restationed, and Debbie was a housewife, and they were a transitional home for kids, meaning many kids came in at the same time, and then foster parents from all over the area would see who to take home and adopt. 4 or 5 little girls in that house, 3 or 4 little boys and me. Pandemonium. But they loved those kids like they were their own. They loved me like I was their own. Until one fateful day, a lovely young woman named Deborah Joan Hines walked in their door. Now, you know my last name is Hines, right? Spoiler alert, this works out. Debbie Hines walks in their door, fully expecting to take home one of the many little girls in the home. But the first thing she sees on the carpeted floor before her, red-headed, wavy-haired Giovanni with my famous red rubber ducky overalls, which I'm not ashamed to say I wore. And she said in her journal of those days, which is how I know this story, that was the moment she fell in love. And she went back to Patrick Kevin Hines and said, let's take him in because he needs us. And I needed them, didn't I? And they took me in at 9 months of age, but there was a problem. I was violently ill all day, every day for the next 30 days. Sick as a dog because of what I've been fed for so long. My gut to brain health was a wreck. Your gut houses your serotonin that affects your brain chemistry. If your gut health is out of whack and you're only eating processed foods for the beginning stages of your life, you're damaging your brain. I was mentally ill from the very beginning. 30 days of being in the Hines home. Debbie comes to my crib exhausted. She hasn't slept a wink in a month. Neither have I. Doctor after doctor, sample after sample, specialist after specialist, $1 million workup. No one can tell Pat and Debbie what was wrong with their new-to-be son until one specialist comes forward and says, Patrick, Deborah, there's nothing physically wrong with this child. It's all emotional, 9 months of age. But that wasn't true. It was my gut destroying my brain. On the 30th day, she came to my crib, she leaned in, and she said, Gio, you're safe. We're not going anywhere. But if you don't knock this off, we're going to give you back. This is a complete contradiction. But she said that was the first night in a month we both slept soundly as if my infant mind had fully heard, understood, and grasped her words. On the 31st day, she came to my crib, she leaned in, and she says, I opened my eyes, I looked up at her, and I smiled. Now, she claims this was some grand moment we shared, but come on, those of you who are parents, it was gas. Come on. You know, I was letting one go, all right? Either way, 2 things that day became abundantly clear. I was home, and I was a Hines. And growing up in the Hines household was a beautiful thing. Patrick and Deborah Hines could have had natural-born children easily, but they opted to take in 3 kids from 3 separate households into one home and make a melting pot of a family. We didn't look alike, and people noticed. Me, I'm mixed. I told you that. My brother's black, my sister's white. Pat and Debbie are Irish and German. People were confused. I tell you this, women would cross the street to talk to my mom when they saw us walking with her. They'd do a semicircle around us like some kind of lion pride. They'd lean in like this. They'd do one of these. They'd lean in closer. And with a prejudicial tone, one of them would say, excuse me, miss, how did all of that happen? To which my mom would very quickly and aptly reply, you know, different fathers. Which was epic only because it was true. We all had different fathers. They just didn't know she wasn't the only mother. They ran right back across the street. We didn't care. We were happy. We were filled with nothing less than absolute unconditional love. And so I thought to myself, growing up, how can anything go sideways from here? I'm going to grow up. I'm going to get into that great school my dad's always talking about. I'll get that wonderful job my parents are always speaking of because I have been given what so many young Americans don't get to have, opportunity and a chance. That's what I thought growing up. And then it all came crumbling down. At 17 and a half years of age, with no prior understanding of mental health, my brain broke. I stood on a stage at Archbishop Reardon High School, the same high school my father went to, that I went to because of him. I stood on the stage at Archbishop Reardon High School, looking out into a crowd of 1,200 people, not one seat was open. Playing in a theater show called How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, playing a character they call Gatch. Gatch, if you know the character, is a philandering businessman. He's got the wife at home, but he's messing around with all the secretaries in the office. He's that guy, okay? And I'm playing this character, and I'm wearing one of my father's old suits and ties that they'd hemmed to fit me because, well, Pat Hines is 6'1", and I'm sure you know by now I'm not. But it is misleading because I'm a very tall 5'7". I'm 5'7" and a quarter. That's a real thing. And so I'm on that stage in that show, but what people around me didn't know on opening night of that play, what people didn't know was that I had been hiding my symptoms. I had been hiding my severe paranoid delusions that I've been having for months, thinking that people were out to get me, trying to hurt me, even trying to kill me. I've been hiding hallucinations, auditory and visual, that I didn't understand. I thought they were real as the hands in front of my face. So I did one thing a lot of us have gotten very good at, adults and youth alike. Silenced my pain. Who here knows anything about silencing their pain? Tell me the truth. There we go. There we go. My new friends, if you are going to learn one thing from me today, and one thing alone, may I calmly ask that it be this. When you leave these doors today, and you go about the rest of your natural, important, and beautiful lives, do me a solid. Never again silence your pain. Why? Because your pain is valid. Your pain is worthy of my time and others, and your pain matters simply because all of you do. When we silence our pain, when we bury our struggles, they only fester until they bubble and then they burst in things like rage, aggression, violence, substance use disorder, suicidal thoughts, ideas or actions, eating disorders, struggles of all kinds, all of the above even. When we unburden ourselves and share our pain with someone willing to empathize, a pain shared becomes a pain halved. I didn't know that back then. I did not know that back then, and it nearly killed me. From 17 to 19 years of age was a rocky road. But on that stage that day, on that stage playing in that show, I began to believe in a fit of extreme paranoid delusion, the first severe symptom I would ever have of the disease they would later say I had, called bipolar type 1 with psychotic features, which I would be triply diagnosed with in my lifetime. The very same brain disease that both of my biological parents had before me when they called it manic depression, that they were actually diagnosed with, which I would learn about when I was 18. I stood on that stage at 17 years of age, looking out into that 1,200-person crowd, and I began to believe that every single one of them was going to simultaneously rise, rush the stage, and end my life. Let's stop right there. What would y'all do if you thought 1,200 people were coming to kill you at the same time? Any audible answer will do. Go. Run. Thank you very much. Whoever said that first, you win the prize. Just to be clear, there's no prize, but you're a winner, and that's what counts. So I ran off stage, and I ran to the lobby, and I was met there with Mr. John Fennell, the theater director. John Fennell was a character. John Fennell had a box haircut from like 1987, but that man's mustache was from 1962. Somehow he made it all work. He looked like a walrus. It was great. Somehow he made it all work. And John Fennell, if you did anything other than what John Fennell told you to do on stage, he'd take his left thumb, he'd place it in the right corner pocket of his mouth, he'd pop it out, making a loud, echoing, popping sound throughout the entire theater, and he would say, "Hines," he always called me Hines, he would say, "Hines, that's the sound of your head coming out of your..." Anyway, that's inappropriate. We won't go there. But that's what John Fennell would do to high school kids on a daily basis. And he was the toughest teacher we ever had, but he was the best teacher we ever had because he challenged us to the core. And John Fennell, he had his own struggles. He had substance use disorder, just like my biological parents did before they died tragically of it. And John Fennell met me in the lobby. And he said, Hines, can you, in a drunken stupor, he said, Hines, can you please finish the performance? It's not even intermission yet. What are you doing? And I just babbled incoherent nonsense the next 10 minutes. I couldn't make out 3 words in a row that made sense. John, of course, called my mom. And Debbie came to pick me up. And I will never forget the look in her eyes as she gazed into mine, for I saw inside them that she saw within mine the depths of insanity brewing behind them. Very soon thereafter, my mom, Debbie, took me to go see my first psychiatrist, Dr. J. Kevin Rist. Now, I have this feeling that she only picked J. Kevin Rist because his name is J. Kevin and my name is J. Kevin, which is not how you pick a psychiatrist. But they said Dr. Rist was one of the best in the field. His secretary, his apprentice, people we barely knew who told us about him. He's the best. Dr. Rist would find time twice during every session to look me in the eyes and do this. Kevin, Kevin, over here. Kevin, 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 I'm one of the best in the field. To which I wanted to reply, yeah, you're also clearly one of the most humble. Anyway, next. But Dr. Rist was a good man, and he was trying to help me, and I would see him for 7 years, even after I jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge. And then I would learn that Dr. Rist, like John Fennell, like my birth parents, like my dad, Patrick Kevin Hines, his parents had substance use disorder. He was on methamphetamines the entire time he treated me and his other patients. He would lose 9 patients in 1 year to suicide. That's not his fault. I'm not blaming him. Dr. Rist needed help, and he wasn't getting it. And Dr. Rist and John Fennell would be the first 2 people I grew to truly care about that would die by their own hands. John Fennell was like a hero to me. He was like a second father figure. I loved that man. On the way to his funeral, I'll never forget it, 7 months before I leapt off the Golden Gate Bridge, on the way to his funeral, my father turned to me while driving in traffic and said, Kevin, you would never do anything like this, right? Kevin, you can never do anything like this. You understand that? You have an obligation to this family. We love you. And at the time, I said to my father, Dad, I would never do anything like that. I'm not thinking like that. I could never do that. I love you. And I believed it because it was true at the time. Fast forward 7 months, 19 years of age. I sit at my desk in my room on September 24th of the year 2000, and I pen that note to my mom and my dad and my brother and my sister and my best friend and my girlfriend at the time. I told them all how much I love them. I told them the things I thought they did wrong. I asked for their forgiveness. I put that note in my shoulder bag, and that shoulder bag by the door. At 6 in the morning, I entered my father Patrick's room. He lay there sleeping, wearing his breathing apparatus, his sleep apnea machine. Who knows about those sleep apnea machines? Oh, you got to breathe. And he's wearing that machine, and he sounds like this. Like Darth Vader snoring. And I startled him awake. And he turned to me, and he immediately said, Kevin, what's wrong? And I wanted to tell him. I wanted to tell the one man who loved me the most in the entire world my truth. Did I? No, I buried it. I silenced my pain. I said, nothing's wrong, Dad. I just wanted to tell you that I love you. In my mind, it was for the very last time. He said, I love you too, Kev. But it's 6 in the morning. I don't have to be at work until 9 and go back to bed. And he put his mask back on. He fell soundly asleep as quickly as he had awoken. That was a gift of his. He could do it like that. And I walked around the other side of the bed. He didn't even know I was still in the room. And I sat on the carpeted floor and I rocked my body back and forth in tears, begging myself to tell the one man who loved me the most in the whole wide world the truth. But no. I went back to my room at 6:30. He entered my room at 7. He said, Kevin, I'm very worried about you. I don't know what to do. Why don't you come to work with me today? There it was. My opportunity. Tell him everything right now. Tell him everything right now. He'll keep you from yourself. I doubled down. I silenced my pain even deeper. I took the welling water in my eyes and I shoved it back. I said, Dad, I'm fine. I have to be at City College today. He said, Kev, we'll go to the beach. I said, no, Daddy. He said, Kev, we'll go to the movies. I said, sorry, Daddy. He said, Kev, we'll do whatever you want. I just feel like you need to be with me today. He was so close, yet so far away. And what happened that day was not his fault. Suicides don't happen because of us or in spite of us. They happen because of a lethal emotional pain that has nothing to do with us. It doesn't make it any easier when someone you love passes that way, let alone 11 people. I convinced my father that I would be fine. He said, Kev, I'll take you to City College. You take the bus home. I'll see you home at 6 tonight. I said, sure, Dad, sounds like a plan. We got in his car. I gripped my shoulder bag to my chest because I didn't want him to find the note. He talked the whole ride. Kevin Hines is not a talkative man. He speaks when spoken to. And when spoken to, he says wonderful little gems like this. I'm going to give a perfect example of Pat Hines. This is the perfect rendition, okay? He says things like this. Kevin, everything I say and do is with a purpose. I am telling you this purposefully. Who talks like that? You should hear his analogies. They're bananas. They're ridiculous. They make no sense. That's Pat Hines. And so he's talking the whole ride because he's nervous. I'm silent, which is even more rare, right? And we're in the car and we get to the City College campus, right? And my father turns to me and he says one of his favorite mantras, Kevin, I love you. Be careful. He said it every day. He calls me to say it today. We are lucky that he can. Kevin, I love you. Be careful. I kissed my father on the cheek as I had done since I was about yay high. I told him I loved him, and I stepped out of the car with my right foot, and I stood, and a tear rolled down my cheek, off my chin, and landed on my right lug's boot onto the middle shoelace. I will never forget that moment so long as I shall live, for 2 reasons. As my father drove away into the distance, I thought to myself, that's the last time I'm ever going to see anybody I love, and the very last time anybody I love is ever going to see me and being completely content to die by my hands. The second reason, they were just darn good boots, and you have to think about those things. And so I walk onto campus at City College. I walk into the counselor's department. I find the most readily available counselor. I ask her to drop me 9.5 of my 12.5 scholastic units at the college without batting an eye, without asking me one question, not one who, why, what, when, or how. Kevin, are you dropping these courses? With a few clicks to the keyboard, movements to the mouse, the classes are gone, leaving only my English class. City College has a different protocol today, San Francisco. When somebody enters their offices in the counselor's department, academic or otherwise, or mental health counselors, they ask the questions, 3 questions, which are crucial to ask if you fear someone is suicidal. Are you thinking of killing yourself? Have you made plans to take your life? And do you have the means? Those 3 questions do not put the thought in someone's mind if it's not already there. That's a myth. What they do is give someone permission to speak on their pain, and a pain shared is a pain halved. They didn't have that protocol for me. They've used that protocol in recent times, and they've saved lives that way, when people have just dropped 50% of their classes, not the majority. Why did I go to my English class? People ask me this all the time. It's very simple. It's rudimentary, really. It wasn't because I was going to become some literary master. Sure, I wrote 2 books, but there are 36 errors in the opening acknowledgments of the first book alone. You think the editor would have caught like one of them? No, that's not why. I went to English class for one reason. The teacher was gorgeous. I just wanted to see her one last time. It was the only rational thing I did all day, okay? And so I left that class. I get on a muni train. From that muni train, I get onto a bus. I sit in the very back row in the middle seat looking out upon everyone. 100 people board this bus, and here I am, all alone in my thoughts, believing I have to die and I have no other option in my mind. And then I began to become ambivalent, what suicidologists call ambivalent, desperately wanting to live while still believing I had to die. And then I begin to cry, softly, moderately, and then waterfalls flowing from my eyes, mucus dripping from my nose, and that's when I began to yell aloud on a crowded bus filled with people. Leave me alone, but I don't want to die. Why do you hate me so much? What did I ever do to you? And now if they weren't before, 100 people are looking down the barrel of the bus at me, but saying absolutely nothing, except for one man. The man to my left says to the fellow next to him, while pointing at me with his thumb, with a smile on his face, "What the hell's wrong with that kid?" And that, my new friends, is what's wrong with some of society today. Our innate human ability to see someone, anyone, in the greatest lethal emotional pain they've ever experienced, but feel nothing for them but fear of them and apathy toward them. That's his or her problem, but it ain't mine. I got things to do. I formidably disagree with this way of thinking. I believe if we are nothing else on this beautiful planet, we are supposed to be, at the very least, one thing together. Our brothers and sisters and individuals, keepers. Would you agree? We're not here for personal betterment or gain. We have a soul and a singular purpose in this life. I think you all know it more than most. That purpose is to give back to those we know, those we love, those we don't know from Adam, and those we don't even like. What we are not here to do is hurt each other with our words or our actions. That much, I promise, is true. The bus got to the Golden Gate Bridge parking lot. 100 people deboarded right there with their fanny packs that were multicolored and zippered from the 1990s. And their foreign accents from all over the world, and their cameras your kids wouldn't understand because there weren't yet phones. And they got off that bus, and I sat there crying, hoping the bus driver would see me, see my pain, and say something kind. "Brother, are you okay? Pal, is something wrong? Kid, can I help you?" I would have told him everything and begged him to save me. I couldn't tell my father that morning, but I was ready to spill my beans right then and there. And he looked at me, and he yelled, "Come on, kid, get off the bus. I got to go." I walked right up to that man. I looked him right in his eyes as waterfalls flew from mine, and he just motioned for me to get off the bus. I walked down those 2 steps that felt like 2,000. I walked across the 2-mile stretch of walkway that is the Golden Gate Bridge for 40 minutes crying like a child. Bikers, joggers, tourists, runners, police officers searching for suicidal people went by me twice. To be fair, those officers had not been trained in suicide prevention in the year 2000. They are today, and today they save between 50 and 120 lives from going over that rail every single year. That's amazing, right? Round of applause for those officers, please. But once again, like City College, they didn't have the protocol for me. They went right by me. I picked a particular light rail. I cried my tears to waters below, and that's when it happened. A woman from my left approached me. She had blonde curly hair and those gigantic sunglasses you wonderful individuals love to wear that do not fit your face. And she looked like a giant human bug. And she walked up to me with a smile, and I thought to myself, this is it. This woman is going to save me. I don't have to do this. I don't have to die today. I left my fate in her hands. Was that right to do? No, she can't read minds. I was hoping for her to say, "Are you okay?" Instead, she pulled out a digital camera and she said, "Will you take my picture?" And I had to laugh inside like, "Lady, this is terrible timing, but okay." I took her camera and she posed about 5 times. And then she took her camera and she walked away. She didn't walk 20 yards off the bridge. She walked back across the entire 2-mile stretch of walkway of the 9th wonder of the world to experience its majestic beauty, and I was there to end all of mine. At that moment, I said to myself, absolutely no one cares. Was that true? Everybody cared. We've established that. They would have ripped me from that rail to safety to show me how much they cared, but nobody knew where I was or what I was doing. I walked back toward the traffic railing. The auditory hallucination in my head beckoned at decimals I cannot express to you without piercing eardrums. Jump now, and I did. I ran forward, and using these 2 hands, I catapulted myself over that rail, but that's not the important part of this story, unlike most people will tell you. Pay attention, this next piece is. The very millisecond The very moment my hands left the rail and my legs cleared it, I had an instantaneous regret for my actions and the absolute 100% recognition that I had just made the greatest mistake of my life, and it was too late. For 99% of the people in the last 85 years who have leapt off that bridge, it's been too late. They never again get to share their stories. They are gone forever. Their families mourn them each and every waking moment of every single day. I fell 250 feet, 25 stories, closing in on 80 miles per hour, the speed of getting close to the speed of terminal velocity in a 4-second fall. In those 4 seconds, these were the thoughts that rang true in my mind, as it felt like the wind was shards of glass against my face. What have I just done? I don't want to die. God, please save me. And then I hit the water. Hitting that water from that height at that speed is like hitting a solid brick wall. You stop for less than a second. A vacuum then sucks you under 70 feet beneath the water's surface. But upon impact with that water, likened to a brick wall, the impact reverberated through my legs into my lower abdomen, and it shattered my T12, L1, L2 lower vertebrae into shards. On that day, I missed severing my spinal cord by 2 millimeters. Millimeters. I went down 70 feet beneath the water's surface, and something I didn't expect to happen occurred. I opened my eyes. I was alive. I thought you died on impact. I opened my eyes, and I was drowning. And I didn't want to drown. I remember thinking to myself, why jump into a giant body of water? I didn't want to drown. I frantically moved in any direction. I was going down the wrong way. My eyes began to bulge. My ears began to ring. I recognized my mistake in the depths I was going, the murkier water. I switched positions and shot for the surface. I could not feel my legs. They were working. I swam as fast as my arms would take me to the surface. I got closer and closer to this lit circle of water above me, and I began to convulse, running out of air, 70 feet in one breath. I didn't think I'd be able to make it, and I remember thinking to myself, Kevin, you can't die here. If you die here, no one will ever know you didn't want to. No one will ever know that you knew you made a mistake. I broke the surface of the water, and I did the one thing I've had control over since kindergarten. I prayed. God, please save me. I don't want to die. God, please save me. I don't want to die. I made a mistake. On repeat, and I promise you, he heard me. A woman driving by in a red car at the moment of my attempt saw me go over the rail and called her friend from her car phone, not cell phone, year 2000, car phone, called her friend from her car phone in the United States Coast Guard, who happened to be manning the waters of the bridge at that moment. The singular reason the Coast Guard boat arrived to my position in the water before I was to set into hypothermia and drown in those frigid waters was because of that woman's phone call. In the water before the Coast Guard boat arrived, I couldn't stay above water. I kept going down. My boots were waterlogged. My long sleeve clothing was heavy. I couldn't reach my inhaler. I was having a violent asthma attack. My breather at the time was in my left pocket because, you know, I was prepared anyway. And so I'm trying to stay above water. I keep going down. I go down one more time. I think, this is it. It's over. I die here and no one's going to know that I knew this was a colossal mistake. And that's when something began to circle beneath me. Something very large and very slimy and very, very alive. And I remember freaking out. I thought to myself, you've got to be kidding me. I didn't die jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge and a shark is going to eat me? No! I'm punching this thing, but it won't go away. It circles faster and faster, faster and faster. No longer am I wading in the water to stay afloat. I'm lying atop it, being kept buoyant by this creature, thinking to myself, this is the nicest shark I've ever met. I did what any of you might do in that situation. I named him Herbert. Because if my parents were going to name me anything but Kevin, I would want it to be Herbert, an old-timey name. Any Herberts in the room? There are never any Herberts in the room, by the way. It's just, it's done. It's an old name. It's over. It's gone. Well, the creature takes off. Obviously, you heard earlier in the introduction, it turned out to be a sea lion. I would later learn, I didn't know this for 1.5 to 2 years. I was on a TV show on ABC Primetime News, and I said on the show, promoting a suicide prevention campaign in San Francisco, I thought there was a shark beneath me in the water. And people wrote into the show from all over the world when it went viral online. One man's letter stuck out of all the rest. His name was Morgan. He was from Las Vegas, Nevada. He was on the bridge that day with his mom, and he wrote into ABC and he said, by the way, ABC News got all these emails from this show and then physically mailed me the emails. Didn't they just have emailed them? All that paper for no reason. I don't understand. One of the letters was from Morgan, and he said, Kevin, I'm so very glad you're alive. I was standing less than 2 feet away from you when you jumped. It's haunted me until now. No one would tell me whether you lived or died. By the way, Kevin, there was no shark, like you mentioned you thought there was on the show, but there absolutely was a sea lion. And the people above looking down believed it to be keeping your body afloat until the Coast Guard boat arrived behind you. You call that what you want. That is my miracle. I will always believe. The Coast Guard boat picks me up. These wonderful officers are secondarily saving my life from that sea lion. They pull me onto a flatboard. They put me into a neck brace. They strap me in from head to toe, and they start asking questions. Kid, do you know what you just did? Yeah, I was there. And they said, why? And I had no reasonable answer. I said, I don't know. I thought I had to die today. They said, son, do you understand how many people we pull from these waters that are already gone? I said, no, and I don't want to know. He said, we're going to tell you anyway. He said, young man, this unit alone, this year alone, has pulled out 26 dead bodies from these waters. And only one live one, you. I can tell you right now that that comment gave me the greatest point of perspective I have ever received. On that boat, I made a cognitive decision that no matter the pain I would ever be in again, I would never attempt to take my life so long as I shall live. I have a plan. You want to hear it? I'm going to grow old to the ripe old age of 112, lying next to my wife, holding her hand in a hospital setting, drifting off into the abyss like in the film The Notebook I never saw twice or cried during. Twice. That's my plan. Good plan? I will never die by my hands, even though for the last 21 years I have dealt with chronic thoughts of ending my life. I think about it on a regular basis. I even get to the point of planning it. But the best thing I do in that situation is turn to literally anyone next to me and I say 4 simple but very effective words. I need help now. It's my shorthand with my family, with my friends, with my doctors, with my clinicians. I need help now. Say it with me. I need help now. Was that so hard? Because I know something about this audience. I know something about every audience I talk to. By the sheer number of people in this room, some of you are in mental pain, brain pain, and you're not talking about it with the people that need to hear it from you. I am begging you from the bottom of my heart, from my gut, don't leave today without telling someone about what you're going through so you can have that pain halved so you can survive said pain. You deserve to be here until your natural end, just like the students you serve. You deserve to be here until the time you die of natural causes. I want you to think for a moment of all the children who never make it past the womb. My wife and I, Margaret, know that pain all too well. Miscarriage. We lost our boy Jack Ryan at 8 weeks. He didn't live anymore. But he wasn't intended to be here in physical form. You all are, for the simple fact that I'm looking into your eyes. I know for a fact you're supposed to be here. I wish I knew back then on that bridge what I know today. That my thoughts do not have to become my actions. Think about that. Our thoughts don't have to become our actions. If all of your thoughts became your actions, how many of you would be in jail for road rage right now? Come on, tell me the truth. Give me some hands. If we can recognize, while in suicidal crisis, that our thoughts don't have to own, rule, or define what we do next, we never have to attempt or die in the first place. My journey around the world sharing my story has helped me meet some of the most incredible people on the face of this planet. My journey in filmmaking has done the same. I've learned stories from every culture around the globe. I learned a lot in this time that I traveled about pain. Pain, my friends, is universal. Pain is also inevitable. It's coming for all of us if it hasn't already in some way, shape, form, or another. But suffering is optional. It's a choice. Before you judge that sentence, hear my words. Every clinician I ever had, besides the one that agreed with me I have today, told me I was suffering from bipolar, suffering from depression, suffering from mental illness, or suffering from an eating disorder when I was when I was a high school wrestler, big time. Suffering, 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 suffering. I adopted that narrative as my own, and I became a sufferer. But that only made me the victim of my own story. It wasn't until I realized that I could fight my pain, live with my pain, in despite of my pain, and thrive against my pain, and hold gratitude inside my pain, that I could always survive it. Instead of letting my pain defeat me, I let it build me brick by brick from the ground up until I was stronger than ever. And so can you, and so can anyone you serve. Don't let your pain defeat you. Let it mold you. I travel the world teaching resilience from pain, because far too many parents around the world are teaching kids to grow up through the lens of these. They're looking at their kids, and they're tired, and they're overworked, and they're understaffed, and they hand them these devices and say, be quiet. And kids of all ages are finding things on these devices that they should not be seeing. They're finding things that are dangerous, hateful, mean, spiteful, and just plain wrong. And they're damaging our children and our teens alike. And they can find it like that. Just like that. I help students and teens and children alike balance the amount of social media they utilize every day. I do it through a friend's app called Half the Story. And we help them recognize the falsehoods of social media, and that need for using it comes from your dopamine hit when you get a like or a follow. And we help them wean themselves off it and get better every single day and do better. And my wife and I then founded 17th and Montgomery Productions to create positive video media to change lives. There's far too much negative, hateful, spiteful, dangerous media in the world. We wanted to create something that mattered, that helped people heal. We get letters from all over the world, thousands a month, saying that this video or that video saved a life, this video or that video changed a life, this video or that video brought them back to faith, things like this. Powerful, positive, wonderful things. I don't own that. I don't say I save lives. I'm a conduit. I share a message. These kids go home, they do the work, and they save and change their own life. That's how it works. We can all be conduits for them to change their lives. We can all be a piece of the puzzle to help them save themselves. No matter the pain they're experiencing, no matter if they're dealing with abuse or neglect at home, they can survive, and we have to express to them that they must. Because just because they might be in a world of pain today doesn't mean they don't get to have their beautiful tomorrow, but they have to be here to get there in the first place. I have lived 21 years past the day most say I should have died. I am grateful for every millisecond I get to walk this green earth. I'm grateful to the 10th degree for every place I get to go, because I didn't build this building, yet here we are. I mean, look at this carpet. It's from 1972, but it keeps your feet warm, okay? Isn't that wonderful? Yes. All right? I'm grateful for everything I get to do, because it almost didn't happen. But most importantly, as I live in the present, I am most grateful today for each and every one of you and the work you do. You're my gift today, so thank you. Give yourselves a round of applause. My message is clear. Hope helps heal. But in order to find hope, some of us might need to be taught how to be resilient in the face of pain. My friends, I'll end with this. Yesterday is history. Tomorrow is a mystery. But today is a gift. That is why we call it the present. If y'all don't believe me, Master Oogway from Kung Fu Panda said that. And talking cartoon turtles always know what's up. Yesterday is history. Tomorrow is a mystery. Today is our gift. Let us always and forever cherish this day and every waking moment of this gorgeous gift we all get to call life. From the bottom of my heart, from my gut, thank you for listening. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you having me here today. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Wow. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. So I just want to announce before I hand the mic over, I didn't just come here to give you a bunch of rhetoric and nothing to take home. I'm going to be sending to you guys some wonderful resources for you, for the people you serve, for your students. I want you to help as many people as you can with these services and resources, and you're going to get a lot of them, so I hope you enjoy, and I hope you can share them with whoever you need to, even some members of your family, maybe even some of yourselves. Thank you very much.
So you'll be receiving those resources via email, like you received the link for today and registration. For those of you here in attendance, you have this book. This is Kevin's book, Cracked, Not Broken. He is staying for a little bit to sign your book. So if you give him a minute or two to take a couple drinks, relax a minute, and then you can line up over here in the corner. For those of you who are out there virtually, if you're one of our member LEAs, one of our member districts, you will be receiving this via JetMail. So you're registered, you're in our system, you will be receiving it after the fact. We're going to take a short intermission until 2:30 when Ann Moss Rodgers comes to speak to you. Thank you. just a second. Virtual world, we're able to take care of some of your personal needs. I do know that there are people in the room right now that have taken care of theirs. If in this next topic that we're bringing up, you feel triggered, anxious, or need support in any way and you're out there, please do what Kevin asks and reach out to somebody and ask for help. Those people that are in your life, they do matter and they make a difference. They make a difference for you. And by letting them know that you need help now, they will drop what they're doing and they will help you. For those of you that are in the room with us right now, if something is triggering for you, you have something anxious going on inside, and you need to walk out because right now you can't hear one more word, we have some clinicians in the room who are willing to support you. Please, no judgment. Stand up, start walking out, and if you're waving, we know you need help, and someone will follow you out to support you. Do we have that agreement here in this room? Thank you, because it's important. We need to take care of us because we can't take care of others if we're not okay ourselves. All right. I didn't introduce myself earlier today, and I apologize for that. I'm Heidi Chavez. I'm a program manager of regional services with CAHELP. Most of you know us as Desert Mountain SELPA or Desert Mountain Charter SELPA. CAHELP is the umbrella overseeing it all, and we are so excited to have this next speaker with us. It was a teacher who first told Ann Moss Rodgers that her son might be suffering from depression. Despite her family's best efforts, Ann Moss's 20-year-old son, Charles, died by suicide on June 5th, 2015. After his many years of struggle with anxiety, depression, and ultimately addiction, he took his life. She wanted to find a way to honor the memory of her son while supporting others. She started a blog, emotionallynaked.com. That blog, that website, has reached millions of people. She also chronicled her family's tragedy in a newspaper article that went viral. She has been featured in the New York Times and was the first suicide loss survivor ever invited to speak at the National Institute of Mental Health. Ann Moss is a certified suicidal prevention trainer, an NAMI Virginia board member, To End the Stigma board member for addiction, and YWCA 2019 Pat Ash Fellow. Please welcome Ann Moss Rodgers.
of you guys. Can you help put that on me?
We're close.
All right. Get the clicker. Make sure it works. Because I know that suicide can be in this room in some very personal ways. I've got the crisis suicide prevention lifeline up and the crisis text line. That prevention lifeline will soon be 988 in the middle of July, which is a lot easier to remember. Can I hear a celebration? All right, we tested the sound, but I'm going to show you a 2-minute video from my son. I did not see this video until after he died. And he is clearly in struggle with his own faith. So cross your fingers. Let's hope the sound works.
Dear God, it's been a long time since we've spoken, but the world around me is so broken. Feel like I'm trapped in a box, I'm choking. People starving and out there others blood soaking. Where are you? Do you even exist in a world where depressed kids slit their wrist and mothers hit their kids when they get pissed? Give me some food, please, something to eat. How about some shoes here under my feet? Got nothing to lose, fool, I live in the street. Haven't seen food in a week, let my soul speak. Follow the mood of the beat. Yesterday a school got shot up. God fell asleep and never got up. It was out there in Connecticut. You didn't have to see their little faces on the internet. Doubt you even remember it. And if you do, I'm sorry for the lack of gratitude. But ignoring my prayers is the wrong attitude. I'm sorry, God. I'm mad at you. Why is the depression? What's the reason for stress? Am I stuck in hell? How do I get to heaven? Where were you on September 11th? People in the streets screaming, God help us, we're helpless. But you help no one. Did nothing. I think the Christians are bluffing. There's orphans who've never seen their mother's face, and their fathers at some other's place. Kids in Africa who don't know how what it tastes. Every night they pray to you, drowning in tears. Lord, please absorb my fears, make things clear. You never respond. Please prove me wrong. Give me a sign. Send me a message into my mind. Something divine I can feel in my spine. Turn my damn water into wine. Make me flow when I rhyme. Cause right now I don't think that you're there, or at least you don't care. How come kids with cancer, prayers get no answer? Do you hear their mothers when they ask why? God, why does my child have to die? Staring at a vacant sky, beginning to cry. Can you hear that? Do you feel that? This is real rap. God doesn't hear crap, like victims screaming to God. Help, God, please get me out. I'm locked in a stranger's house and they won't let me out. They say God works in mysterious ways, but if you ask me, God's been dead for days. If I'm wrong and it's not like that, explain it to me when you write back.
Steve met my son, Charles. I never saw that video until after his death. In fact, I didn't see a lot of the rap music he wrote that expressed his thoughts of suicide. I never knew my son struggled with thoughts of suicide. This picture is a happy mama moment. He's being escorted by his favorite teacher, Miss Fretwell, on homecoming court as a sophomore. And it was a proud mama moment because our family had been chaos. He was doing a lot of drugs and a lot of alcohol, and I didn't understand why. And I wondered, well, is it a mental illness? Is it that he has the family issue of substance use disorder? Is it that he's trying to fit in, and it turns out it was all of the above? But at the time, I don't know any of this. All I know is that I love my son, and I wanted to figure out what was going on, and then what did I want to do? I wanted to fix it, because I'm a parent, and it's my job to usher this child into adulthood as a thriving member of society. But it wasn't long after this picture was taken that Charles's drug use started to escalate more. And we were struggling as a family, well, you know, what do we do? So my husband and I went to go see a counselor And we exhausted all local resources. And even one time at school, they suspended him for having a panic attack. And how that started was that he would admit to suffering from anxiety. He wasn't diagnosed with depression until later. So at this point, we don't have any of that information. He was at lunch, and he was allowed to leave and go to a special part of the cafeteria and listen to music. And at the time, they used something called iPod, which, you know, was before the iPhone, and it just had music on it. Well, apparently, he was 1 foot past the line where you're allowed to be standing there listening to music. So they called me in, because clearly I needed to discuss this because, you know, he'd had the crime of the century. So I go in, and we have the discussion. I can see I'm not going to get anywhere. And I did the pick your battles thing. I'm like, okay, do your 2 days of detention. Second day of detention, he is really struggling. And again, he asked the monitor of the room, may I listen to my music? She says yes. As soon as he puts on his music, he's getting into it. That administrator that sent him to detention in the first place walks in. And she starts yelling. And he's got on the earphones, so he doesn't hear her at first. And she knocks him off his head. And he just is like, oh my gosh. Now, Charles wasn't physically aggressive. He was 6'2", 135 pounds, so not exactly threatening. But he was afraid of her, and he had a panic attack, and he goes, oh, I want to speak to my mom. So she suspended him, because apparently, she said, he wanted to be suspended. I found my allies at this school, but at the time, this school was run kind of like a juvenile detention center from the 70s. The only thing it was missing was bars on the window. But that's how it went for us. Because he was a substance abuser, there were a lot of people judging me and I didn't feel very well supported. So he starts to use more. We've gone through all the resources, and our counselor says, well, there's only one step left. I don't want to be going to Charles's funeral. And we kidnapped our son out of his bed and took him to a wilderness program. You don't do this because you've caught your kid with a beer and a joint. You do this because you think your child's life is truly at risk. I've introduced a new trauma to my child and to us. And looking back, I still don't know if this was the right way to go. But I did know that his behavior was so reckless and so out of line, I don't think he would have lived much longer. You will see in his hands his notebooks, because this is when he really became a prolific writer. This is where we also got a diagnosis. ADHD combined type, depression, anxiety, and something I had never heard, cannabis dependence. He was using marijuana to manage his emotions, because a kid who was struggling with thoughts of suicide, why wouldn't that be a good idea? It works. And he ran into so much prejudice in the mental health system that he had become jaded. They had humiliated me, they humiliated him, and in a system where I thought I was going to get support, I got none, and he saw that. I kept asking, what does high risk mean? Because they kept giving him tests and coming back and saying he was high risk. High risk for what? What does that mean? I didn't have the magic phrase, psychological evaluation. I wish I did. But I did get it in wilderness for the price tag. Drum roll, please. $32,000. I had saved up 10 years to do a kitchen renovation, had sold things on Craigslist and eBay, had my tidy little kitchen renovation budget. I was so proud. It was gone in 10 weeks. But I would pay that all over again. He didn't love wilderness at first, as you can see from his face. Because up until now, you know what roughing it was for Charles? It was going without the whipped cream on his Starbucks iced coffee. He wasn't like one of these kids who's going to live out under a bridge, not Charles. So he actually felt buoyed and good about his success there, but he did not like that next step. Because the next step, they recommended therapy or boarding school, something even more expensive than this. They told me what the price tag was. I'm like, I don't have a boarding school bank account, but our home equity loan did. So that's how he got there. So he goes to therapy or boarding school. He likes that about as much as the wilderness step, maybe worse, but I can say that he did bond with a counselor there. And I want you to know that we didn't just send our kid away and think, oh, he's going to be fixed and he's going to come back home and everything's going to be okay. We went up 12 different times over that 18-month period and did family work, family therapy. And when we couldn't afford to fly, and the only reason we could afford to fly is that my mother would send me the money for a ticket, or we drove 10 hours to upstate New York, sometimes taking his precious dog with us. Imagine the luxury accommodations on the way with the dog. So he ends up coming back in 2014, having spent some 22 months outside our home in some kind of placement. Yeah, he was angry, but Charles was a really loving child, and he couldn't stay mad for long. What I didn't know is that during this time, he became addicted to heroin. So I think I'm doing all these heroic things to keep heroin out of my son's hands. No way he's going to meet it. I can prevent this. And he was already using it. He did not use needles. There weren't paraphernalia like tinfoil or spoons with burns on the bottom or candles or anything like that. He snorted it. I didn't even know it could be snorted. He would use it at night, and then when he woke up in the morning, he was normal. So I rarely saw signs of it. There were a couple of times when things were off and strange, but nothing that I couldn't talk myself out of, which we tend to do as parents. So how did I finally find out about the heroin addiction? Knock, knock, knock. I look out on the porch, 2 policemen. I'd love to tell you that was a rare sight, but it was not. They were plain clothes, but I immediately knew they were cops. I invited them in. I knew they weren't coming for my delicious pound cake, so I asked them, what's up? And they immediately showed me pictures of my son sharing my family silverware or selling it to a local pawn shop. Not just one picture, at least 12. And so they leave. I take a deep breath. I open up the drawer. I had a 12-piece plus setting that, I had lots of relatives and I had inherited all of it. I had bought it. One spoon stared back at me. My heart dropped to my stomach. He came home, and I calmly asked him, some policemen came by, and they showed me pictures of you with my silverware, and I'm ready for you to explain what's happening here. And he tells me this whole elaborate story. I have to give myself credit. Because of the many years I went to Families Anonymous, and anybody in here that is a clinician or a school counselor, that is an excellent organization to support parents. NAMI Family Group is as well. I had been going to Families Anonymous, so I knew not to yell at my child, not to accuse my child, not to make him feel ashamed, because what happens when we make someone who is addicted to a substance ashamed? They use more, because that is their coping strategy. Finally, he tells me one more story, and he asked me, "So, Mom, do you believe me?" And I said, "Well, that's a pretty wild story, Charles." Didn't accuse him, and then I did something amazing. I shut up. All this silence. I didn't fill it up with a lecture. I didn't fill it up with advice or fixing it. I let the silence sit there. And you know what happened when I did that? He confessed. Sort of. I may be addicted to an opiate. I think I need help. I've been wanting to hear those words for years. So he goes off to detox, then to rehab, and then he goes to a recovery house. The Saturday he came home from the rehab, I called it Saturday Charles. I actually wrote a blog post about it because he looked so good that day. That sense of humor was back. He was smiling. I was barely holding on to the chair because I was about to fall over from laughing so hard. That's the kid I missed. And here he's back, and I didn't think, oh, this is going to be great. But I decided I'm just going to enjoy today. But they called me the next day from the recovery house, and they told me my son had relapsed. And I was like, so soon? So it was their protocol that the house manager take him back to detox, and on the way there, he had to be cleared at the hospital, and then they would do a suicide risk assessment at the mental health hospital. He gets to the mental health hospital where they do the suicide risk assessment, and they turned him away because they said, "We don't take those people anymore." Basically telling my son he was human trash, not worthy of a 20-second suicide risk screening. He gets checked into detox. Lee, the house manager, calls me. Everything's good. He's checked in. He'll need to stay there 3 days. He'll come back to the recovery house. But at this point, he's over 18. And he walked out because he saw a friend of his. They just wanted one more party. One more, and then they'd go back. But they never found their way back. And for 2 weeks, we didn't know where he was. So my husband and I are sitting in a restaurant on a Friday, and the police call my husband's cell phone. Still don't know how they got his cell phone number. And they tell us that they're going to meet us in the parking lot of that restaurant. First thing I think of is, they're coming to tell me he's arrested. Isn't that awesome? And then I realize, they don't come tell you that your 20-year-old child has been arrested. And I realized they were coming to tell me that he was dead. They arrive, and sitting in the back of a police car in a parking lot, they delivered the worst news of our lives. And they told us they had found our son dead that morning. I thought for sure it was overdose. And then my husband, after all the screaming and wailing, said, "How did he die?" And I remember thinking, that's such a crazy question. Why would you ask that? Of course, it's a completely normal question. And the policeman said it was a suicide, and the method left no question. A lot of people still think that my son died from an intentional overdose. That is not the case. We had a memorial service. Everyone was very supportive. But then I would run into people and I would start talking about my son, and they would cut me off mid-sentence. And that really hurt because they were fearful of walking into my tragedy. They were fearful it would rub off on them. I mean, we had the triple stigma, we had the addiction, we had the suicide, we had the mental illness. And I was tired of it. I was tired of it. So I wrote this article for the newspaper. I called them and I said, you remember that article I wrote for you 2 years ago that did really well? They remembered because they got a lot of hits and they got a lot of subscriptions. I said, I want to do a follow-up. And they said, yes, take as long as you want. It took me 5 months to write 1,200 words. Number one, when you're a grieving mother, you can hardly put 2 words together that make sense. Number two, I needed to work through all those difficult emotions that come with the suicide loss. The why, the intentionality, the anger, the bitterness with the world, the sadness, the irritability, the feeling of relief, which I still find it hard to admit that. There was one day I opened that article before I sent it to the newspaper, and it sounded like an angry manifesto, and had it been a person that would have spit at me from the computer. But that is the beautiful thing about writing. It helps you process your emotions in such a way that it doesn't yell back at you, and you write whatever you want. And I realized that I was doing a lot of what Charles was doing to manage his episodes of pain. And I realized that writing allowed me to release my pain. And the article I thought no one would ever read went viral. And at the place it was originally online, at the newspaper, it got 2,000 comments. I read every single one of those comments. I replied to every one of them. It took me about 8 months, but if somebody was reading their story and mine, they deserved to be heard. I'd already started this blog called Emotionally Naked to find healing through writing and shine a spotlight on the taboo topics of mental illness, addiction, suicide, and grief. I wanted people to know those signs, because what my son said could have been bullet points under the phrase, what do people thinking of suicide say? But I was uneducated. I felt his despair, but I didn't have a bucket to put it in. So didn't know that that despair didn't mean he had hit rock bottom, but instead meaning he did hit his definition of rock bottom, which was suicide. I'm doing, after the newspaper article, pretty well. And then I'm facing that first death anniversary. And as some of you in the room know, that is really, really a hard day. And it's not the day itself, it's the anticipation of it coming up that's the hard part. I couldn't sleep, had an epic grief relapse. I was losing hair again, breaking out in rashes and all other attractive things that happen to you when you're grieving. And I was up at midnight and I wrote this article called The Final 48 Hours, thinking who would want to read that? Because blow by blow, I was telling people how we got the news, how my son died, and how we reacted to that news, including piling on the kitchen floor when we got home and saying things like, I can't survive, before realizing, yes, I can. Yes, I can, because as much as it hurt that first year, the way I got through it was telling myself, you know, it'll never be as bad as getting the news. That part is over, and it will never, ever hurt that much again. So I wrote this, and already I felt the release. And I published it, although my finger kind of hovered over it going, I don't know. And I published it, and I decided not to share it on social media. And up to then, I shared everything on social media. But my subscribers did, and 60,000 people came to the site the very next day, and then the day after. I thought, what's going on? Why are people reading this? And then I get a message from a girl named Lauren. A friend of her mother's had shared the post on her Facebook page. She had clicked through and she had read it. And she sent me a note that said, 2 days ago, I thought about taking my life. Reading a post from a mother who's felt such devastating pain has changed my perspective on life. And she then reached out to her own parents and she asked for help. I did not save Lauren's life. Lauren saved her own life, and I merely validated what she already wanted to do, and that was tell someone. It was also the very first time I realized that people struggling with thoughts of suicide want to tell. I didn't know that. I had no idea. I thought it was some big secret that they kept to themselves. And I now know it is an act of despair and not selfishness, as people often say. Lauren's story was a turning point for me. Before I became full-time in suicide prevention, I owned a digital marketing company. It was my job to write articles with titles that would bring people from Google searches to that website. I wonder if I could do that for suicide prevention. At the same time, I looked at my son's death certificate, and at the bottom, I looked at his instrument of death, and I thought, how did he know to put that together? I mean, Charles was really, really brilliant, but he was no engineer. And then it hit me. He Googled it. He Googled how to kill himself. And I looked up the phrase I thought he might have looked up. And there were sites offering step-by-step, and they're still out there, step-by-step instructions on this way to die. Detailed videos, and they are still out there too. I thought, well, like I'm going to call Google, and they're going to take it down. I knew, I'd been working with Google for a long time. So I started writing my own posts with those cringeworthy titles that I will not repeat here for fear that they would trigger someone. But I had to use words that I thought they were using when they were looking up ways to die. And the results were incredible, not at first, because all I knew to put on the page was, the text line and the lifeline and things like that. I didn't know what else to put up there. But little by little, people would send me resources, and where I found the most help was from those with lived experience. And I couldn't find them in 2015, so I went to Out of the Darkness walks, and I just asked their story, and they so generously shared their stories with me. So I made a video, and this is made by me, so it is not incredible. It has no words, and it just has music, and I know you guys can't see it if you want to get up and look at it, but it is 56 seconds, and it's what I have on the page, and I have it on YouTube. Now, do know that if I were sitting across somebody struggling with thoughts of suicide, that telling them how it might make a parent feel would not be helpful. But this is a piece of self-discovery. They choose to watch this video. I've been accused of clickbait, which I guess technically it is clickbait, which in their language means I put a title on it that doesn't actually give them what they're looking for, which is that how-to. There are 60,000 views of the video on YouTube. Kids, adults, people from all over the world reach out, and there are over 3,000 comments on that page alone, not counting the countless blog posts that are written over the years, trying to catch people who are struggling with thoughts of suicide, because a lot of times they're in this trance and they just want one person to answer. They just want to hear from one human being, just like Kevin said. This was my first comment on YouTube. Thank you. I was thinking of suicide tomorrow. You changed my mind. My husband and I held each other and we sobbed. I'm like, oh my gosh, it worked. It worked once at least. But it's worked many times, and that's the beautiful part. Tiffany says, thank you for emailing my school. And I told the counselor what I talked with you and told him some other things that had happened. She reached out to me. She's 12. Had just turned 12. Searched the internet for that phrase. She put in her school email in the comment box. Now you can put in a fake email, but I thought that school email was a cry for help. And I contacted the school, well, kind of. So here's what happened. There's the end of, has a school district, says the EDU K through 12. You can Google that and find the school district. She's 12, so then I can figure, all right, she's, in middle school. In this case, I used the bullying hotline on the website, because I know that those are mad, and I know it will send out an alert because they put it on the front page, right? The counselor reached out to me and said he had connected with her, and then she came back and left this, 12 years old. I thought, what a sweetheart, because they don't always tell me. Sometimes the counselor will call me and tell me, but the student doesn't always. This is one of the resources I created on the page. So they look up the cringeworthy title. And one thing I recognize we don't tell children is, how do you tell someone you want to suicide? What do you say? Who do you tell? Who do you choose to tell? What makes it a good person to tell and a not so good person to tell? So I've got 2 articles on that page now. They can click it and go to one that just gives you instructions, and it's for teens, adults. But I have one specifically that says how to tell a parent you want to die. And this page probably has, at this point, maybe 400 comments. And I have to go and answer them as well. And then one young man came to the site one day, and he said, I don't want to tell my mom and dad. I don't want to see the look on his face when I do. So he said, I want to tell my favorite teacher. I'm like, that's a brilliant idea. That is such a good idea. And I was like, Max, that's awesome. I definitely think you should do that. And he did. And he came back to say, thank you so much. I've told someone and I started getting the help I need. You literally saved my life. No, Max, you saved your own life. You're the one that told someone. You're the one that reached out. I merely gave Max the permission he needed to tell someone. And then I got this from a mother. Her daughter had gone to Google, looked up the cringeworthy phrase, clicked on the link, followed the direction, and went and told her mother. And the note for you all in the back says, "I would just like to say thank you. Because of you, my daughter was brave enough to tell me her thoughts. Thank you for your work." I had been accused of trying to save Charles over and over again. So what? If it helps me heal, why not? I can't save my son. He's already gone. But if I can help in this vast and uncaring world be the voice of somebody that says, "I'm listening, I care," then I can do that. I've probably answered tens of thousands of these comments now from people all over the world. So I'm going to go all kumbaya on you for a minute, because I think we need a little emotional break, right? It's been an emotional day. I need a breath, you need a breath. So let's take a second. Breathe in. Breathe out. Now have a little, take one more. And out. We got a little laugh break. And it's a 30-second clip. And if you can't see it, you can hear it. How many of y'all like that? Yes, we needed that. So we'll briefly talk about mental health, because we know that mental health is often an underlying issue for those who are struggling with thoughts of suicide. Not always, because not everybody who suffers from a mental health condition is suicidal, and not everyone who is suicidal has a mental health condition. But more often than not, they do. This is what we're conditioned to look for. The sad student. Oh my goodness. But you know what we really often see is nothing, because they ghost you. And you're like, where is Frank? He was in my life, and now he's ghosting me. Where is he? Probably home, depressed, in his closet. Reach out, Frank. This is what I saw. Happy-go-lucky, fun kid, constant revolving door of friends and people. And at one time I said, "Charles, why do you always have to spend the nights? Why do you always have to have people spend the night or eat dinner and constantly have people over?" And he says, "I'm afraid of being alone." And later I would read in his rap diary, he was afraid of what he was going to do to himself at night. And if people were there, he was less likely to follow through. And this is also what we see. Angry, irritable, oppositional kids. And we know from our ACEs training that oftentimes these kids are struggling, but they're also at risk for suicide, even at young ages, because they'll kind of not know what the word suicide means, but they'll say something like, "I want to run out into the traffic." So we're going to take a closer look at suicide. First, we do not want to use the phrase committed anymore. Died by suicide. Ended his life, killed himself. The phrase committed comes from 1400s England, when it was actually a crime. And you're probably like, well, how did they actually do that one? So what they would do is they would deny the family a place of burial. And then they would deny them a service. So that's where it came from. It's been in our lexicon for hundreds of years. We need to get rid of it. And if you happen to use the word committed, just stop yourself and go, oh, that's right. By your stopping yourself and self-correcting, you can explain to others why you're not using it anymore. So I got a question for you all. Asking a student if they are thinking of suicide can A, plant the idea in their head. Ooh. B, make them want to mow the lawn, although there's not a lot of lawn here. C, give student permission to talk about suicide. A, B, or C? C. Yes, you guys have 100% so far. I love this quote from Jessica Chalk Goldman. I interviewed her for the book Emotionally Naked, A Teacher's Guide to Preventing Suicide. She says it's all about normalizing the conversation on suicide. So she asked every student that comes into her office if they are thinking of suicide. And at first I was like, man, that is really, really brave. I can't believe that. But what's happened is that she has ended up finding and preventing a lot of people from dying by suicide that way. Sean Riley, and this is a picture of a mimeograph machine from the early 80s. And what does that have to do with this story? So it's back in the early 80s, they've come and told Sean Riley, who's now retired, that he is going to be teaching psychology this month, or this semester. And he's like, I was a science teacher, but I'd never taught psychology, so I had to look at what the school board had put out for the syllabus for this particular course. And he said, there's one little blip, suicide prevention training. He remembered an incident where he had helped a neighbor years before. And he went to the library and he researched this topic. None of the parents wanted him to do it. The principal was, and he goes, it's on the syllabus for, the curriculum. I'm teaching it. So he put his little class together. He mimeographed, because there were no copiers in schools in those days, a little one sheet that, you give out to students to say, what are the signs, what do you need to do? And the most important part of his talk to students was telling them that if a friend is struggling, you must tell someone. You must tell someone. You can't keep this a secret, because this is between life and death. Class leaves, they go to lunch. Everyone's abuzz about talking about this because no one was talking about it, and they had heard that he had gotten a lot of pushback. So that made it even more discussable topic. A teenager sitting at the table overheard the discussion. Sean said he's sitting in his classroom. Student comes in, slides this letter across the desk, and leaves. The note on top said, and it said, this is from my locker mate. She slipped this into my locker. And it was detailed plans of how she was going to kill herself that night. So they were able to intervene. And Sean said that the young lady who was thinking about attempting suicide sent him a Christmas card every year for like 50 years. So when are youth more vulnerable? And you'll read about this in the book, but we have 2 times that make them more vulnerable to suicide. Now, they have to have underlying risk factors. Everyone, millions of kids are bullied, and not all of them die by suicide. There are underlying risk factors. These are kind of the last straw events that push kids towards suicide. Transition and mini transition. So we have the big ones, middle school to high school to college, college to real life. Then we have those little ones we don't think it's much about, which are spring break, back to school, holiday break, summer break, and back to school. A parent's deployment, or that parent coming home from military service. A move, change in district, change in school. So there's some big ones and some little ones. And then we have relationship disruption, and I'd say that over 80% of the ones I get from YouTube are fights with a loved one, family member, a best friend, a romantic breakup. And one that we often don't think about a lot, which is grief and loss. And we've had a lot of that. And parental divorce is another one. So kids are not aware that you have to feel in order to heal. And when they are in a lot of pain, what they'll often do is numb that pain with drugs or alcohol, like my son did. And we need to teach them that it is okay. It is totally okay to share your feelings, to feel your pain, because the really intense emotions last about 60 to 90 seconds. So what do they say, draw, do? Well, a lot of times they'll write an English paper about a girl with an eating disorder. That one you need to turn over to a counselor. This young lady drew a picture of her drowning. I don't know if you can see it very well, but she put the piece of paper in a trash can next to the teacher's desk. Teacher fished it out, gave it to the school counselor. Sometimes when they're younger, they'll draw a person further away than the rest of the family. And how you would manage this one with a child is say, Sebastian, why did you draw yourself so far away from your family? Be curious. Ask in a curious way. And lots of times, kids will tell you. They ghost, they isolate. My son behaved recklessly. And another thing he did, he was a frequent flyer to every single school clinic. Every school nurse of every school he ever attended knew me and knew my son by first name. Hello, Mrs. Rodgers, the second I walked into the door. Those kids who break their arm, have a lot of headaches, catch everything, often are kids who are also suffering with a mental illness. And those headaches and those muscle aches, those are real. Because if you're tightening up all the time, they're not psychosomatic, they're real symptoms. So frequent flyers to the primary care or to the school nurse. So what do they say? I'm such a burden. I can't do this anymore. I can't go on. I feel so numb. And I'm going to show you my son's last tweets. If I died, no one would notice for at least a month. If you want to see who really cares about you, see who's there when you have nothing. Death sounds nice. You would think if I saw that, I would know what was going on. Well, I didn't see any of them because I was blocked from his social media accounts. He was, after all, 20 years old. Somebody sent me the first one, and I thought, he's hit rock bottom, he's going to ask for help. And he did hit rock bottom. Only my definition and his were not the same. And this one from YouTube, I can't do this anymore, waking up every day, feeling numb, no longer finding any joy in any activities. So basically, every bullet point under what are their behaviors. So how do you respond? So another quiz question. If a student or teacher tells you they are thinking of suicide, you should A, call a librarian. B, say, tell me more and listen with empathy. Or C, tell them fart jokes. Which one, A, B, or C, you guys? B, good job. So we want to say things like, tell me more about how you feel, and then we need to talk more or shut up. Shut up, we need to shut up and listen. Listen with empathy. Because the greatest gift you can give another human being is to make them feel heard. If you remember nothing about what I've said, the greatest gift you can offer another human being is to let them be heard. When you're telling somebody about a bad day, do you want somebody to fix it and offer you solutions, or do you want them to listen to you? I forget that all the time. I catch myself, I'm like, oh, what am I doing? And even when I've done an assessment with a student, I'm like, oh, I didn't mean to say that. Back up. Continue talking. I'm going to shut up now because I want to listen to you. We do not want to say, you have so much to live for. I'm unsure of next steps, but we'll figure this out together, okay? We can't extract promises from them, like promise you won't kill yourself, because they don't have the tools yet. We can't make somebody promise that when they're in a phase that none of us understand all that well to begin with. We can ask things like, why do you feel worthless? Instead of, you are not worthless. Do you see the difference? Those tiny little changes. So you engage in private conversation. Tell me more about how you feel. Listen with empathy without fixing. Say something like, this sounds really serious. I'm concerned about you. And then the question, are you thinking of suicide? How would you ask an elementary school kid? Are you thinking of making yourself dead? It gets a little bit more complicated with the younger kids. But yes, they are thinking of suicide because a lot of kids who are feeling that way at the age of 15 started feeling that way at the age of 8. I'm grateful you shared this with me. That took a lot of courage. I don't know what the next steps are. You may not know, but you're still showing partnership. And then you want to connect them with help. But you do not want to send a student down the hallway by themselves because they can take a dangerous detour. You should escort them, call the school counselor, make sure somebody is with them. And sometimes teachers are not in a place where they can do all these steps, and that's okay. In those instances, you just need to go straight to number 4 and connect a student with help. Engage in a private conversation, listen with empathy without fixing. Ask the question, are you thinking of suicide? Connect the student with help. All right, if there's a suicide at your school, the principal should A, cancel classes and declare mental health day. B, give teachers talking points on grief and suicide and discuss in class. C, bring in wild ferrets as grief service animals. All right, this is a little tougher. Which one do y'all think it is? B. Exactly, because what do we do if we do A? We're isolating students who are at risk that much more. University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, my alma mater, I'd say in November, had a suicide and they canceled class the next day. I'd already sent them the press release for my book. I was outraged, and guess what happened? They lost another student, and there were 5 more attempts in the ER on the mental health day. That's a really tough way to learn a lesson. So we want to prevent kids from getting to crisis in an educational setting, and what does that mean? Build connection and belonging. Play those icebreaker games. Give them an opportunity to connect with each other and learn more about each other. They love that. And not just kumbaya, sit quietly, mindful games, but stuff like throwing sound, because you got these ADHD kids who want to be active, right? Build coping skills. So I know you have SEL, but start to embed that in your teaching curricula. Promote talking and seeking help as signs of strength. And I love this quote by Jennifer Hamilton. In order to achieve, what is it? In order to achieve, you have to put wellness first. When students are emotionally well, what do you think they do in school? They do well. their grades go up. The principal and the superintendent are super happy. So what if we started with that being our core mission and built everything out from that? I'm not talking about remaking the education system. Good God, that would take forever because you know how slow it is. Make tiny little changes. There's lots of training out there, Safe Talk, Living Work Start, and QPR. I think in California you all are required to take Living Work Start. But the more you know about it, the more comfortable you are with the topic. I think we should have these crisis text line posters in all the classrooms. And I've got text the phrase "Love Charles" to 1-833-614-5778. It's on page 22 as well. A lot of free ebooks, the download for the day, and this crisis text poster, which you can print out on your printer. A lot of schools are using Gaggle, and it will scan the Google folders. And one young lady wrote in white font that she was going to take her life. Nobody could see it, but guess who could? Gaggle could. Sent up a message to the school counselor, and they were able to intercede and stop that child from taking her life. This is a game by a chemistry teacher called the Mental Health Check-In. Every Monday, she says to her students, I want you to rate from 1 to 5 how you're doing. And they will rate from 1 to 5. And it's not really just, what the answer is. It's the fact that someone asked, and it gave that child a moment of being visible. And that's really, really important. Setting expectations for failure. That's what Lee Lyska does. So at the beginning of every school year, she talks about we're going to fail a lot. We're going to mess up a lot. But here's the good news. That's where the learning happens. And then Tammy does this license plate project. And she starts with a PowerPoint presentation, but then they have to make a specialty license plate that fits the Department of Motor Vehicle standards. And then Wendy Turner has her kids put on a bracelet every day. Green meaning, I feel great. Yellow meaning, I feel okay. Red meaning, I feel terrible. And she has started to embed those strategies in her classroom. The downloads that I mentioned earlier, so we have a lot of those connection games that I was talking about. I say assign a student to coming up every Monday with a new game, and they can pull it from this guide. And you can text the phrase, Love Charles, to this phone number. The Cult of Pedagogy gives a good overview of the book. Jennifer Gonzalez did a really great job. I'm really proud of what she did. I would love for you all to fill out the index card on your table and just tell me one thing that you learned today that you didn't know before. And if you don't want to do that, you can just leave me a note. And then if you could leave it at the end of the table, because I will read every one of them. And I'm going to end with a quick story. So after my son died, a young lady came up to me and she goes, Mrs. Rodgers, I have something to tell you about Charles. And it's a story I think you'll like. She says, I suffered from depression, and one morning I couldn't even get out of bed. She said, somehow I did, and I hauled myself to school, and I put on my mask of a clown, and I was standing there with my friends in the hallway. And she said, I looked up, and there's Charles staring straight at me. She said, we had never met, and we'd never been introduced. But there he was staring at me. He took a beeline and stood about a foot in front of her and broke out into a rap song he created on the spot just for her. Who does that, right? Her friends are stunned and they're like, what is he doing? And then they start to die laughing. And then he bends down and he gives her a hug and he said, pretty girls shouldn't look so sad. And he makes his way down the hall. And she said, of all the things anyone has ever done for me, I will never forget that moment. And when I'm feeling down, I go back to that moment. Because as funny and as talented as Charles was, his greatest gift was letting other people know that they matter. And that is something that each and every one of us can do starting now. Thank you so much for listening. It's late afternoon, but I really appreciate you listening to my story today. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here today. Thank you for taking your time on this heavy, heavy topic. Our kids are suffering. We have adults who are suffering, and we need to find ways to support them. Asking them those questions that Ann talked about makes it real, brings it to light, and we, in our fields, can help save our kids. One at a time, whatever it takes. Those of you who registered online, you will also receive Emotionally Naked. It's a teacher's guide to preventing suicide and recognizing students at risk. That will it will come in jet mail to you. Those of you who are here, you have it already. And just like we did with Kevin, there's a book signing over in the corner. So please, tonight, say I love you. To those who need to hear it. Your family, your friends, tell them you're here for them. And if they need help, you're going to help them find that help. Because we're in this game together, and it's not a game. So, go in peace, have a blessed day, and let's kick the rest of the school year out the door. Have a great afternoon.